right. So welcome everyone. I'm really have been looking forward to being with you and talking about this really important topic. Been waiting months now to do this. So if we haven't met yet, my name is Eileen Devine, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have a practice where I support parents of kids with all types of brain-based differences. And those brain-based differences have very challenging, confusing, bizarre, irritating, frustrating behaviors. And so I help them understand how their child's brain works so that they can parent them differently with that in mind. But the other half of what we talk about, if not more, is about their own experience, their own parenting experience, how it has shaped them, how it has impacted them, and how they really have the endurance to move forward, what they need to do every single day to have the endurance to parent their child who requires such intense parenting. So that's a little bit about me. Tonight we are going to be talking about coping strategies, and the format for our time together, just so you have a heads up, is I'm going to give us some kind of foundational ideas around coping strategies that are specific to your parenting experience and relate to your parenting experience. And then I hope that we can have a discussion about it, that there will be absolutely time for you to ask any questions that might come up for you, or just share anything, any reflections, anything that it brings to mind. I find that that's when parents get the most out of these types of trainings, is when they hear from their peers as well. So I think we need to begin with talking about what we're even talking about with coping strategies, like coping with what? And the answer may seem really obvious because obviously all of you have a shared lived experience of parenting a child who has these intense needs. And so that may be the answer. Well, of course, we're trying to talk about how to cope with this parenting experience that's so unique and so difficult and challenging at times. But that's only what is there on the surface. What you're managing is, of course, incredibly difficult, but that leads to a whole host of other things happening within you, within your family unit, with maybe other children, if you have them, that are what society would consider neurotypical, and the experience it has on them, and you worry about them. It has this trickle effect that I know you all know that, but oftentimes when you're in a survival mode, it's hard to get to what's underneath, right? What we see is the stressors, the day-to-day stressors on top. And if we slowed down for a moment, well, several things could happen. Some parents that I work with are concerned that they might just get swallowed up by their experience. And so they don't let themselves go any deeper than what's kind of in the moment, what they need to focus on that day, that hour, whatever it might be. The other piece is that when we go a little bit deeper, we find like, oh, okay, that's what this is about, right? Yes, it's about caring for this child, and sometimes a child who is needing 24/7 care, that care is exhausting physically, mentally, emotionally. And then what? What kind of impact, ramifications does that have? So we can't resolve or cope with the thing unless we really understand what that issue is. So we're going to talk a little bit about what might be underneath the surface. And I always talk with parents about curiosity being the death of shame and criticism. Oftentimes we're talking about it with their child's challenging behaviors or way of interacting and being in relationship. And the last thing that parents typically think of when they think of those challenging behaviors is to be curious about them. Because when we're curious about something, just by the nature of being curious, we want it to get bigger. We want to know more about it. We want it to take up more space in that moment in our mind so that we can really look at it and be like, what is happening there, right? That's when criticism, shame starts to trickle away so that we can really see it for what it is with as much non-judgmental curiosity as we can. but it also applies to our experience. The parents that I work with are so resilient, and they're such lovely, wonderful, kind people, and they're incredibly hard on themselves. They always think they should be doing things better, that they should have known better, that they should have seen something before it happened, whatever it might be. And so to be able to look at themselves and turn inward can be a really vulnerable and scary thing. But if we can take a step back and practice non-judgmental curiosity about what's happening with us, then we can better identify what that thing is, right? That we really need to have some coping strategies around. Brené Brown, if you're not familiar with her, I would encourage you to get familiar with her. She's wonderful. She's a researcher. She has her PhD in social work. She's written lots of books. My guess is that most of you have heard of her. But she has this quote: the opposite of recognizing we're feeling something is to deny emotions. When we disengage from tough emotions, they don't go away. Instead, they own us and they define us. So when we get into survival mode, or if you're living for years on end under this chronic stress and emotional distress, oftentimes we think, if I can just get through this and kind of bulldoze my way through this, just stay strong and make it, to this endpoint or that endpoint, whatever that might be, that you'll come out on the other side and all those tough emotions will just be gone. But that just isn't the way we humans work. So there's, if we try to pretend that they're not there, get away from them, ignore them, stuff them wherever we can, they don't go away. They just get more momentum and more power, right? So coming back to what is that? What might that be for you, so that you can then see it for what it is and begin to gently work through it, to cope with it. And how do you do that? That's, of course, what we'll be talking about. So there's three primary ways that Brené Brown talks about us just as humans managing tough emotions. And so I want you to think about your experience, what you know about yourself. And then if you are in a parenting partnership, to think about your partner, because I think it's also really worthwhile to spend some time thinking about what they might be coping with. And which one of these might ring true for both of you. So the first one is to try to ignore it, retreat, shut down. Okay, so that could be retreating and moving away physically, like just getting out of whatever it is. It could be shutting down emotionally, so you're still physically present, but anytime a tough emotion or a tenuous situation comes up, you dive into your electronics, or you leave to go to the other room, or you turn the TV up louder, anything like that. The other one is that you come out swinging, right? So you offload onto other people. And again, there's no shame or blame. It's something that we do automatically, and it's a protective measure, right? Because these difficult emotions are coming at us, and we're like, no way, I will do anything to not have to recognize those, cope with them. And so I'm going to offload it onto usually the people who are closest to us. So this is really easy usually to recognize, because it's irritability, it's lashing out, it's being hypercritical, right? It's that little kind of, I think of it as this little voice on my shoulder going, that wasn't very nice. Like, who are you, right? Because that's not typically how I am. But if I get emotionally overwhelmed, that could be one of the ways that I manage that, right? Instead of managing it, the actual thing that's happening. The last way is and I see stereotypically, I see a lot of moms do this, is moving towards. And what that means is you are going to be everything to everyone, and you are not going to slow down, because, oh my goodness, if you slowed down, what would happen? If those emotions caught up with you and you had to sit with yourself for even a few minutes, maybe you'd get swallowed up by whatever it is, the grief, the sorrow, the resentment, the anger, the fear, right? And so that's when we see these moms who already have so much on their plate. And again, I'm saying stereotypically, dads can certainly fit into this as well. Volunteering for everything at the school, right? It's like they have the fullest plate and yet they're adding to it, adding to it, adding to it. What is that about, right? So those are the ways that we don't want to cope with the things happening, our emotional experience. We want to recognize that maybe that's how we're coping now, and recognize that it's not going to help us in the end. It will catch up with you, right? The book by Brene Brown, in case you're interested, is called Rising Strong. Again, she's written lots of books, but that one in particular, I recommend to a lot of parents because it's about when you have fallen down, and she talks about it as, you just got your butt kicked, you're in the arena, face down on the floor with dirt smeared on your face. How do you rise strong? How do you rise strong from adversity and come back from that? So in case you're interested. All right. So these are some of the common experiences that parents of kids with intense needs that I've worked with over the years have had to cope with, had to manage, that have really taken a toll on their emotional well-being, their physical well-being, perhaps their partnerships, their marriage, the relationships or the well-being of the other children in their home. And so again, looking at what is it exactly that's happening for you so that you can care for yourself and cope to help all of those other things be less intense, whatever it might be. We have exhausted, anxious, resentment, guilt. We'll go through these, but whatever that might be for you. So thinking about what resonates with you as we go through these. So overwhelmed by the constant 24/7 care needs of their child. And this could be very intensive, like a child having seizures, and now the medical complexities, a child recovering from a major surgery, whatever it might be. It also could be behaviorally, right? If you have a child who is impulsive, who's a runner, who is prone to aggression, and you need to be with them, even at older ages, you have to supervise them as you would a toddler, right? That can be very, very wearing. Exhausted by the role of being everything to everyone. So a parent, a partner, a negotiator, a case manager, a school advocate, medical researcher, and more, right? That nobody else is going to do it, so you have to do it. And how is that then impacting your mental health, your physical health? The anxiety that would naturally come around needing to make high-stake medical decisions for your child, especially in short timeframes, especially when you are getting different opinions from different quote-unquote experts. Excuse me. And especially when you have been in that medical system for long enough, because of the nature of your child's illness, that you yourself have experienced trauma from that medical system. Now, looking at it through that lens, most of the parents that I work with never see themselves as having experienced trauma in their parenting experience, but they absolutely have. When we look at the definition of trauma and we look at what they've been through in the medical system, sometimes in the school system, it absolutely qualifies as that. So then we know what that is, right? We know, okay, if I've experienced trauma, that's a whole nother set of coping skills than if I'm having low levels of anxiety, for example. Both need to be addressed, but the intensity in terms of addressing them are different. Feeling very alone and isolated. No, we are biologically wired for connection with other people. It's a biological imperative. When we don't have that, especially when it's related to one of the most central parts of our lives, our parenting experience, that takes a toll, right? And so is that what you need to have coping skills and strategies around? Managing waves of resentment or guilt, shock, confusion, fear, grief, feelings of being inadequate or self-doubt. Right? These are all really common themes that I hear parents talking about. Many times when I'm talking with a parent, and there's, especially in a partnership, there's lots of anger. It's just the way they describe their home or the relationship is just lots of anger, lots of aggressive language and body postures and interactions. I'm always listening for the grief underneath there, right? And the fear, because that's usually, again, the thing that needs to be coped with, the thing that needs to be recognized and managed. Like, yes, the way of reflecting that, the way of dealing with that grief and using anger, and that also is part of it. But if we don't ever identify the grief, then it's going to be really hard to really get to that anger and have that dissipate in the way that we would like. Needing to do all of the above while in survival mode, while feeling burnt out, and while feeling extreme caregiver fatigue. One of the things I like to make sure I talk to parents about is with the caregiver fatigue, and with the feelings of burnout, we have research that shows us when it's not coped with, when it's not identified, and then the parent isn't able then to take steps to address it, that parent then begins working harder and harder and harder with less results, right? So they're expending more energy and getting less results from that expended energy. So we want to make sure, just for your own wellness, again, you're working so hard. We want to make sure that all counts, right? That energy is being made the most use of that it possibly can. All right. So coping by tuning into your nervous system. So I want to start talking then about when we have identified what might be going on, and that in and of itself can take some time, and it may not be something that you're able to do on your own. You may need a support group, peer support, maybe a therapist, right? It's not an easy thing to be able to do that, especially when you've been living in survival mode for so long. In order to stay in survival mode, you have to disconnect from your body and your emotional state to a certain degree. That's what it takes to stay in that survival mode. And if you've been in that for many months and certainly years, it's going to take some time to switch that off, and to be able to then tune into your body, your nervous system, and figure out where you need some more care, okay, some more healing. So a stressed out, when you're in survival mode, it leads to a stressed out nervous system. That stressed out nervous system can lead to serious health concerns, more periods of emotional dysregulation. So when I talked about trauma, for example, an individual, and I'll note another book, The Body Keeps Score, is a book that talks about the impact of trauma on the body. When somebody has experienced prolonged stress and trauma, when we experience stress, our cortisol levels go up. That's not a bad thing. That's how our body's supposed to be working. What happens when you are in a survival mode for an extended period of time, under lots of stress for an extended period of time, the cortisol levels just keep up, they flood you with cortisol. At some point, your body says, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. So your adrenal glands start to shut down, and you have a whole other host of issues, right? So if you were prone to depression, maybe you're feeling anxiety. If you were prone to anxiety, maybe you're now feeling depression. There's lots of physical ailments that come from it, that I cannot get out of bed. It's not just, oh, I wish I had a few more hours of sleep. It's like, I literally can't move through the very, basic parts of my day. If that resonates with you, then that's something that a doctor can help do labs and see where your cortisol levels are. But those cortisol levels will help you understand whether that is something to be coping with a medical professional. When we look at the cortisol levels of individuals who have returned from combat, and the cortisol levels of individuals who are parents of kids with extraordinary needs, they are the same. You cannot tell by looking at the labs the difference between those two populations of people. Okay, so that's how serious it can be for for many of us and the folks who share our lived experience. When we are dysregulated, so when our nervous system is out of balance, our thinking brain is offline, causing us to be more reactive. So when you are in a situation where you absolutely need your thinking brain online because you're dealing with some serious medical issues with your child, as an example, if you're not caring for your nervous system and coping in that way with the stress, then you will be dysregulated, and your thinking brain, I think of it as like our window of tolerance, and you're pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and then your thinking brain is offline. So those cognitive skills that you absolutely have to make good decisions, you don't have access to them, right? Like you would otherwise. So it causes us to be more reactive. And that reactivity also shows up in our relationships, right? I'm sure that many of you have experienced that, what your reactivity looks like instead of taking that step back in those challenging moments. So this results in less ability to cope with the stressor, and less ability to move out of that survival state of being. So how do we begin to do this? Listening to your nervous system and listening to your mind. So one way that I encourage parents to cope, a coping skill, is to start to observe and reflect and notice the patterns. We do this with their child's behavior, but I also ask them to do this with their own internal dialogue, internal way of being, so that they can start to figure out what is it that I need to be coping with, that I need to develop more coping skills around. So your bodies always tell us first. When we are having an emotional reaction of any kind, our bodies will tell us first. If you're disconnected from your body, again, no fault of your own, that's what our bodies do to keep us safe, then you're going to have to work on that, really, really paying attention to what happens to you when you start to feel whatever that emotional response is: fear, grief, resentment. Those are the ones that are coming to mind. There's others. Increased heart rate, increased sweating, tightening in your chest, a strain in your neck or your face, other bodily sensations. Those are just some of the few common ones. And then listening to your mind. So what thoughts are on repeat? There are times when we have thoughts that are on repeat that we don't even recognize them as that until we stop to really pay attention to what we have running through our heads all day long. And many times it's not as kind as it should be, right? So that may need to be one of the places where you need more coping strategies, is how do I really start to rewire that audio tape in my head, right? And sometimes we've had it there for generations, right? Maybe by the way we were parented, what we were told. It can go back for very many years. So being able to rewire that may take some time. So really paying attention to what thoughts are on repeat. Where do you start to feel just the very beginning signs of anger or agitation? Where are those very beginning signs of feeling confined or smothered, feeling on the verge of tears and feeling out of control? Again, no shame or blame at all for having those feelings. But if you notice that you don't even recognize that you are feeling that until you're in it, then that might be one of the coping skills that you might want to consider, is to do the observation and reflection to figure out, like, where are the beginning inklings so that you can manage it there, right? Rather than let it get to a place that is unmanageable. If you don't know where to begin with coping, begin with self-compassion. Self-compassion, meaning, of course, responding kindly and lovingly towards yourself when you're having a difficult time, when you feel like you failed, when you don't like something about yourself. Remembering that you are human, giving yourself grace. And instead of saying, I'm just going to soldier on, I'm just going to, like I said, bulldoze my way through this and get to the other side, then I can take a breath. Instead of doing that, which, by the way, just totally chips away at your resilience faster than anything else, I encourage you to stop and acknowledge just how difficult it is and how appropriate your feelings are for the situation that you are managing. Give yourself comfort. Self-compassion, there is lots of research. Kristen Neff does a ton of research on this. She has lots of self-compassion written reflections, as well as audio recordings that you can listen to for free on her website. She has all this research that shows how self-compassion is related to protective factors against anxiety and depression. It absolutely makes us more resilient people. Really easy coping strategy to do in the moment. If you can remember, right? We're so prone to beating ourselves up. And then here are some other coping strategies, again, that look at healing and strengthening your nervous system, because I really do believe, again, it's not just my thought, it's from all the research, that our nervous system is central to our mental health, our physical health. And so when I talk about with parents about coping, what we're really, it always comes back to our nervous system, right? So providing yourself with grace and self-compassion, moving your bodies in ways that bring you joy. And this doesn't have to be hard exercise. It can be stretching gently. It can be yoga. It can be taking a walk. But when we have those really harsh emotions and we don't cope with them, we try to do, again, offload them onto other people or get away from them or whatever we might do, they settle in our nervous system. And movement is the best way to get that out of our system, right? Breath work is highly underrated. Another wonderful coping skill that can down-regulate our nervous system very quickly, or prayer, meditation, whatever resonates most with you. Focusing on movement, sleep, fuel for your body, food that makes you feel good, brings you joy, spending time reflecting on what keeps you grounded in a challenging moment. So some of these other coping skills, I mentioned journaling, I mentioned reflection. When you are experiencing, again, you're like, I can tell I'm in the middle of this tough moment. How do I need to cope with this situation, this or this, tough feeling that's coming up for me? Having a mantra, right? You're strong, you can do hard things. Staying soft. That's one of mine for my daughter who has neurobehavioral challenges. And when she's having a hard time, I say, stay soft, Eileen, stay soft. And instantly it helps me, my body posture, my facial expression, the tone of voice, right? Visualization of a person who provides you with co-regulation. Even if they are not there in that moment to support you, visualizing them and bringing them to mind is a great coping strategy that, again, can help you get on more firm ground to do whatever it is next that you need to do. Or a place can have the same impact. Acknowledging that you are human and what you're doing is incredibly hard, right? I say to parents, it is as hard as you think it is, right? And so when you stop to think, if you allow yourself to really take that in, the intensity by which we need to care for ourselves has to match the intensity of that situation. And when we think about that, it can be a little overwhelming because you're managing some pretty intense situations. It's not starting and jumping in and having to have this all done at once. It's just beginning, right? That's the first step, is to really, again, identify what it is that you need to be coping with, recognizing, and what can you do to cope. Don't fight a good cry. The way I think about our urge to cry, when many of us are like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, right? If you're able to, I want to encourage you to do just that. I think of a good cry as our nervous system's best reset. And so if you feel that urge to cry and you can remember that that's your nervous system begging you for a reset, right? I know that there are some situations where you just can't do that, but if you're able to, please allow yourself to do that. And then finding spaces that provide you with empathy and with connection, where you are truly seen and heard, right? You have those other people who see you and hear you and can provide you with the co-regulation that you need to be able to then be that stable co-regulator for your child and probably others in your life too. All right. I think that is the end. Let me see here so I can stop sharing. Okay. So we wanted to leave a good amount of time to have a discussion on these coping strategies or others that have been brought to mind that you think the folks here tonight and then listening later would benefit from, or what comes up for you when you hear some of the topics that I addressed for you, that I brought up tonight. Anything that comes up for you, or questions that you might have too. So I'll stop talking so someone else can jump in.
Hi, my name is Jeanette, and I've been feeling all of these things this week. I'm also sick, so apologize for my voice. But one of the things, I'm grandma and guardian, and one of the things that I've been struggling with, oh, I'm getting emotional, is when you take care of somebody's child or pet, and something happens to that child or pet, you're just like, not on my watch. It's like I have that added layer that it's leaves me with anxiety on a regular. And so while I have found ways to cope with some of the other stuff of, fatigue and burnout and, just all the other things that go along with it, there's that other component that I haven't been able to shake.
Thanks for sharing that, Jeanette. I'm sending you so much compassion as you kind of share what your situation is. I imagine it's incredibly difficult. How are you able to work through the other things? You said you've worked through those things, and this is kind of the thing that lingers. How are you able to do that?
Well, I don't master it all the time, I'll say, but I do do. I've joined several different support groups. I try to have a good support network, although I do feel isolated in that regard outside of my epilepsy Facebook groups and some of the moms that have graciously, taken my hand. But breathing, I do some journaling. I like to bead. Anything that kind of keeps me busy. And when I'm having some negative thoughts, I try to turn them into positives. When I'm feeling the resentment, specifically resentment around my son, because my grandson is my son's child, and him not stepping up, if you will, I have to be compassionate towards him in a way that makes me, not have those feelings of anger and resentment. So I do let myself feel those things. But one of the things that I've realized is my grandson's surgery was a year ago. And I'm just now realizing, like, okay, I had to stay strong and stuff for so long. And we're a year out, and I'm able to kind of breathe a little bit. And now that I'm able to kind of breathe a little bit, all these feelings and emotions are just coming to the surface, very raw, very raw. So in the last, 2 to 3 months, I've really gotten myself involved in various groups. I belong to a kinship group that kind of helps the grandma component. And I try really hard to communicate to the other members of the household that help with his care, although I'm the primary carer. And fortunately, they do, step up when I'm like, look, I just can't cope with this right now. And I'm in that mode today. I'm really, really in that mode because I've been sick for a week, and I'm just like done. So journaling, hobbies
Yeah.
that keep me busy. One of the things that I probably could get better at is, moving my body more and eating healthier. I've put on quite a bit of weight since last year. That cortisol is probably really high in me right now. But those are the things that I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so clear to me in just listening to you talk about where you've been and what you went through and where you are now, that you have done a ton of work in terms of figuring out what you need to do to remain resilient, what you need to do to cope, right? And sometimes we get to a point where there is that kind of letting down period, right? Where it's like, oh my gosh, I had to keep that adrenaline going for so long that now that I've let down, your body is saying, oh my gosh, thank goodness. Like, I'm just going to flood it. Like this is what this is what I've been holding back in that survival mode. So I like to hear that you're being gentle with yourself and that you're asking for help. If, going back to the anxiety, if the anxiety is you're doing all of this coping, everything else, and that is still lingering, there's some times where we don't imagine that we need to go to a provider or a professional, but with that last lingering thing, it's like, okay, I've done all this work and all of this is going pretty well for me most of the time, but this last little thing, like, I can't cope with that on my own. I need some help, whether it's talking to somebody, whether it's considering medications. That's out of my scope, but I know a lot of parents that I work with are like, oh, I've never thought of that. I've never thought that I would need that kind of thing. So considering those things too.
Yeah, I have recently felt like I probably should, start seeing a counselor. I've seen counselors over the years for various things. And it's always helped me. I have started utilizing some, natural homeopathic type things, some essential oils to help with anxiety levels and stuff like that. It's just that one little thing that I talked about of like not on my watch. It's hard to describe, like that feeling, but it results in a feeling of anxiety.
Yes. So what it sounds to me, it sounds very reminiscent, or if not exactly what it is the hypervigilance. And that is a part of PTSD and trauma, right? That like, I can't let down my guard. I'm on edge, but I don't know why. Like, I know in this moment, I don't need to be on edge like this, but your body will not let you relax, right? And so again, that's something that, that's a lot to deal with yourself. So thanks so much for sharing. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Can I add something there?
Yeah, of course.
So many of you may know me. I'm Audrey. I'm the Director of Patient and Family Advocacy for the Pediatric Epilepsy Surgery Alliance. So happy to have Eileen here tonight. But in the epilepsy world, I think one of the things I've talked about this with, colleagues and other families, and a lot of our kids have seizures after surgery, right? So not all of them are seizure free. And if it's not seizures, it's something, right? It's a behavior that's really extreme, or safety concerns because they might trip and fall because of, whatever it is. It's not, I understand the hypervigilance from the PTSD, and I think that's real. But I think for us, it's like we have to be on for our kids. And, getting woken up in the middle of the night and, rushing to the ER, we've all done it, right? And whenever I know for me that my reaction is so much more physical and visceral when I get that adrenaline surge than it used to be. It's like that. And it's really intense. And I think it's because, like you said, there's already like kind of a heightened level of it. But I do see that across the epilepsy community, and definitely in the epilepsy surgery community, that epilepsy is really awful, and even if it's the surgery stopped the epilepsy, now you're post epilepsy surgery, but you have still the trauma of that dozens or hundreds of seizures a day or whatever it was before you had the surgery, and all the trauma that went along with that, and watching your child seize. And that is just really hard to recover from.
Adding on to what Audrey said, honestly, all of that, everything that Jeanette and Audrey said, honestly, And on top of it, I think something that's really changed for me is that every time I put my daughter to bed, I think she could have I have a brother who died in his sleep from a seizure. So it's very real to me that every time I say goodbye to her, every time I put her to bed, this could be the last time. And just but that for me over the years, my daughter's gonna be 14 in a couple of days. Over the years, it's changed from kind of being sure, hypervigilant, all of that, but it kind of switched to being more like almost like practicing stoicism and thinking, I'm gonna make sure I tell her I love her. I'm gonna make sure I give her a kiss. I'm gonna make sure I give her a hug, tell her whatever I need before she goes to bed or before she goes to school, because even if you don't have epilepsy or whatever, everything we have going on, you could, any of us could leave the house and that could be the last time. But it's kind of switched to a more positive lens, if you know what I mean. The fear is still there. It's always like sort of like a always in the back of my mind all the time.
For
people who don't experience all this stuff, I think they might think it's a terrible way to live, but I don't think it is. It's kind of like being in the moment. It's not negative to me anymore.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you, being more in the moment and not taking anything for granted.
Yeah. And I think the other way is that I have sort of tried to cope is that, I have 2 kids with disabilities, right? And then we don't get I realized that if I wait to be sort of out of crisis mode, I'm never going to get anything done that I want to get done. And I'm going to, so I've decided to just kind of enjoy the little pockets of joy wherever I can find them, and to kind of do what I want to do anyway. If I want to take an art class, if I want to go on a trip, I'm just going to do it anyway, because I can't wait for things to slow down. These kids are going to need me forever as long as I'm around, and they're around. So,
thank you.
I have a question, Eileen. I would love to hear some strategies. I don't know if any of this resonates with any of the parents here tonight or listening later. But I hear sometimes parents say, don't tell me about coping strategies. I don't have time for coping strategies. I don't have time to do anything, right? I don't have time to shower some days. I don't have time to. So can you just give us like a few, just a few suggestions of things that anyone can do anywhere that could help bring some relief? Because I think that finding time to do another thing, it just can feel like adding to the list. So any suggestions you have would be great.
Yes. And I will preface that with something. So I didn't mention in my introduction, but I think I did somewhere on the slides, that I have a teenager who has significant neurobehavioral challenges. So not the same diagnosis or set of medical issues that you all are managing, but serious neurobehavioral challenges. And when I was first in this journey a decade ago, and I started listening to people helping me understand what it means to be more resilient. That is necessary for the endurance that I'm going to need for this parenting journey. So I thought, okay, I get that. I need to have this endurance. I need to build my resilience. How do you do that? You take care of your nervous system. Okay, so how do you do that? And when they started talking to me about what helps you heal and your nervous system and have it grow stronger, I was like, really? Like, that's it? Like, that's going to make a difference. So I say that because if you are new to this idea that getting away from kind of the popular culture self-care, like, go have a date night, go get a massage, go for a walk, whatever it might be. If that is all you've heard and you've not heard about what really makes us more resilient people and healing your nervous system, then you may need some time to let these ideas settle in. But my challenge to you is that if you have that initial response, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm certainly not offended, to give it some time. What harm is it going to do? It's not going to do any harm, that's for sure. And I promise you, you will end up in a better place. So if you can have that little bit of faith. So with all of that said, the things that I encourage people to do to begin, this is a starting point. This is not where we want to end up and stop here, right? This is a starting point, is again, self-compassion is first and foremost. You can do that in moments a day. Nobody knows what you're doing all day long. What does it mean to give yourself more self-compassion? It usually is how we talk to ourselves. It's usually slowing down to give ourselves comfort in those really hard moments versus saying, just get through it. You should just be stronger. So-and-so would do this better, right? Why are you getting so upset? Don't get upset. Don't get upset. Other people go through harder things. This is not, there's a comparison in people's suffering, right? That doesn't get us anywhere. So acknowledging how hard it is for you, not in relation to anybody else, and comforting yourself, whatever that might be. The second one is breath. So breath work. There are lots of free apps out there that can show you how to move through significant, meaningful breath exercises in 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, right? So to be able to do that, that will strengthen your nervous system. It will help lower the anxiety, get you on more stable ground. So your thinking brain is online, so you can make better decisions. You don't feel so reactive, right? Having that kind of visceral reaction just boiling under the surface all day long. And then the third one is, again, to move your body. So this one, I know a lot of parents automatically jump to like a 30-minute walk. Like I could not leave my child unattended for 30 minutes. And I get that. But can you sit in a chair next to them and practice contracting your muscles and releasing and contracting and releasing? Move from your toes all the way up your body. That will start to help you connect to your body again, if that's been something that you've not felt in a very long time. And it will help making that tension and releasing it will help settle your nervous system. Can you lay in bed for 2 minutes listening to soft music and doing the same thing? I mean, it's these types of things that are a starting point. And what I just want to encourage you to do is just begin. Even if you, again, are thinking like, seriously? Like those things are going to make a difference. It's not just my ideas, right? I had to see the research to buy into it. And now I am here supporting parents in the same work, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know if others have ideas, small things that you think other parents could manage with your shared experience.
I've recently learned about, like, they call it like green noise and brown noise, and in these in their apps, there's apps that are out there, and tying the breathing into it. So I have been listening to some of those sounds too, and I do feel like it's helping me. I do feel like it's a little different than just listening to some calming music. It's like tonal and like binaural tones during meditation has helped me. But I've just recently discovered these different noises, they call them, like they're referred to as green noise, brown noise. There's several different colors out there. But I've been kind of practicing with those a little bit. And the only other thing I will say that nobody's really touched on yet is I have gotten back into some of my spiritual practices that I haven't been able to go to my spiritual center. I haven't, been involved with my church. Well, COVID was part of that too, but, I've been so busy. And recently, this year, the pastor of my spiritual center started this 10-minute, 6 o'clock in the morning, 10-minute devotional. And it's really helped me. I started doing it a couple of weeks ago. I just do it. I just do it. And it helps to kind of start my day. So my spiritual practice has been kind of coming back into the fold too.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Any last comments, questions, thoughts? We have a few more minutes.
We got a comment that was, the presentation is very spot on with how we react differently within a family and how much this impacts the sibling of the special needs child as well as parents. And that is a topic we'll have a guest speaker to talk about siblings in the new year. I'm lining up content for the new year. I will say one more thing. When you said soldiering through depletes resilience, that really hit me. Because like Jeanette, I have a series of things that I do for myself that are like the little things. I'm trying to do a 10-minute lie down in the middle of the day, and with or without breathing, but just like that, taking that, because I'm always like so frantic and rushed. It's hard to do. I don't do it most days. But when I hear that, when you say that, it's like, even if we can find a little practice, if you can just tell yourself, like, do it, because if you don't do it, it diminishes your resilience, I think was what you wrote or said, depletes resilience. And that really resonated with me. So
most of the excuse me, most of the parents that I meet, when we start talking about resilience, they think that is resilience. Like, I'm just going to soldier through and get through this and, like, put my blinders on and just plow ahead. It's like, no, that chips away at your resilience. And the wonderful thing about resilience is that we are all capable of becoming more resilient people with, again, these drops in the bucket day. It's not like you're born a resilient person or you're not, or you were raised to be a resilient person or you weren't. Like, that is not true. So that's the good news. But the kind of bummer news is that you have to do it, right? A village helps, of course, but you have to do it and just begin. So that would be my hope, my wish for all of you.
Hi, this is Lola. I just wanted to say thank you. And I feel like sometimes we need to be given that permission to cry, to feel the grief, to like stop. Like so my son's 11. 10 years ago, he had a stroke, and that was quite traumatic. And now we're dealing with, I think we're on the journey of what is drug-resistant epilepsy, and kind of exploring kind of surgery now. So, and this is like, it took me 8 years to find a place where I actually went to see a therapist, kind of deal with all that, learn to do that, and I'm here again.
Yeah. I'm glad you're here again, right? That disenfranchised grief, especially, that's not recognized by others, right? It's not socially sanctioned. We don't have ways to mourn. We don't have people recognizing it. We kind of sit with it on our own, unless you have a community like this who absolutely recognizes it and can help you grieve. I mean, that's part of the healing process. But in our parenting experience, those losses that come up sometimes without us even knowing what hit us, right? And not having anywhere to go to really even talk about it because it's so misunderstood. So I'm glad you're here. Sending you lots of compassion as you make, sounds like, some decisions for your child.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. It's been wonderful to be with all of you. Thanks so much for having me. Audrey, anything you want to
That's
say
it.
to
Just
close
thank you
folks out?
so much, Eileen, for being part of our community. Those of you who haven't already watched it, Eileen did a really nice series a few years ago for the Child Neurology Foundation called Managing the Toll of Caregiver Trauma. I think that's the title, and it lives on our website, the link, so you can find that. I periodically go back and listen to it just as a refresher course. That was very helpful
happy
as well. Yeah. Because it's everything is cyclical. You have good days, and then it's like all of a sudden, whoa, I need more support. So anyway, I'm just really glad you're here for us, and thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.